Ready? Okay. David, whenever you're done, we can start here.
Mm-hmm.
You checking the Skype?
No, I'm logging in so they can use
Ah, okay, great, thanks. Okay. Clara, whenever you're done, we get started.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It doesn't really go page by page. Yeah.
Just see that my boarding is in 1 hour. So.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be. You have to go in 1 hour.
Yes,
Okay. So it's been a pleasure. Okay.
After 5 minutes, I have to go.
Okay. Okay. Great talking to you. Okay. Ready? Okay. Welcome back from the break, everybody. So we're now coming to the last two sessions for this Free and Safe in Cyberspace EU edition 2016. We're now to the solution phase. We have asked all the participants to this event to propose solutions, and we heard many proposals during the panels. Of course, there hasn't been enough time as we hoped for our participants to come out with written proposals, more cohesive, and we'll hope to have online discussion on these matters, with the current speakers and the speakers from last year to actually build up more shared solutions on these matters. The one solution we would like to propose is one that we've been working on for about a year and a half, together with some former speakers of these events we've had in New York, in Brazil, and here in Brussels. Now it's about 55 people which have been involved in these discussions, and advisors and partners of the Trustless Computing Initiative, which have all contributed. Some of the contributors are here. Yampolsky, we're going to be mentioning here, that have contributed extensively to these discussions. Now, okay, the text that we're sharing today is something we take responsibility for, because there wasn't enough time to agree upon a shared platform, something that we hope we can do in the next week or two. But no, we should point out that there was a lot of many discussions and writing and studies that we did with Bart Preneel, Roberto Gallo from Cryptus in Brazil, Jovan Golic, which is also co-organizers, Stefan Schuster, Peter de Kostic, Richard Stallman, Mel Vandenberg from Capgemini, Netherlands, which is here, and he worked with us and Technalia very deeply on trying to make this proposal in a single paper. Then we fast realized that you couldn't really do this in a paper, so you could really just do a manifesto and then some much more extensive study. So we're in the process of writing. We got a lot of inspiration from Stephen Bellowin and Bruce Schneier, which were our guests last year. So let's go down. So this draft, as we said, but let's go down what it says. It's a five pages document which we've given to all of you here. And so the first thing that, basically the first intuition of this manifesto is that constitutionally meaningful digital confidentiality and integrity, so a level of security and privacy that respects your civil rights, but not only your civil rights, because the Constitution covers both the civil rights but also the rights to safety and the obligation of the state to do it. So constitutionally meaningful means not only your rights as traditionally considered just your civil rights, but also your rights to have a state that protects your security. Now, oftentimes we forget that the Constitution, it's not only about the rights of the citizen, but also obligation of the state. So that's why constitutional meaningful is a key element as far as understanding what the goal of this document is. So this would need, so the constitutional meaningful communications and effective digital investigation capabilities are not an either or, but a both or neither. This is something which is very counterintuitive. Now, everywhere you read, it's either or. And if we increase security, we must reduce civil rights and so on. And we have figured that we have strong indication by looking at what it takes to do privacy, that it actually, they require much of the same principles, standards, and certification concepts. So achieving these levels of assurance, so really constitutionally meaningful, means going way beyond the state-of-the-art that we have now. And this means that current IT systems, which have 10 million lines of code, are incredibly complex. They involve dozens of providers and suppliers and so on, are beyond any verifiability, no matter what budget you have. So there is current high complexity systems will never comply to this. But you can imagine instead some, and we detail this here, we can imagine instead other services which we define as ultra high assurance, because today high assurance is the name of the highest standard out there. But the highest standard out there is way broken, and it's been demonstrated at all levels, civil and military. So we need to coin a new term, ultra high assurance. So these systems would certifiably implement extreme levels of transparency, accountability, and oversight. These are concepts that Bruce Schneier came here last year and kind of summarized what is the route we need to go if we want to go to these levels of assurance. On top of that, we add in this manifesto and these concepts the idea that we need a security review relative to complexity that needs to be crucial, because if we have transparency, accountability, oversight, we can have as much transparency, accountability, and oversight as you can imagine, but if the systems are so complex, it still doesn't matter. You will still not be able to take away or verify the vulnerabilities that are there. So this is another crucial concept in that. And the kind of oversight also that has to go down to the CPU level and to the fabrication oversight. When Bruce Schneier was asked about this issue, about the CPUs being compromised and so on, he said, well, at this stage we should assume that all major CPUs in major platforms are compromised, because NSA went and compromised everything. So we should assume they are. And so somebody asked, what should we do? Oh, well, then the only thing left to us is choose our enemy. Well, we figure that by reducing the computing base, the complexity, really radically, maybe that's not the option. In fact, we went around and we found in Brazil that there is a maker of a CPU which is verifiable in hardware and software. So you can actually verify and then intensively verify. We've seen that you can have fabrication oversight which are really deep and even involve 5 citizen witnesses that can actually verify that no funny thing happened on the fabrication oversight. Of course, you cannot use the latest fabrication plant in Asia, which are 15 billion with 5 nanometers. You have to use the older plants, which are in Europe, which have already agreed to let you implement this kind of verifications. And so the options we have are not choose our enemy. Maybe we have an option to actually reach these levels. We reach these levels both of privacy and security of the user and of trustworthiness of the tools that law enforcement use to do their job. Okay, so this oversight, accountability, it's not only the technological side, but the access to the hosting facilities should have the same oversight. Both the human process and the technology involved. And then the standard setting governance and the anonymization network. At the end, where does this buck stop? The buck stops to the governance body that will decide what are the principles and certification guidelines that will certify a certain technology and offering as constitutionally meaningful or not. So who are those people? And we talked about this in a challenge, which was a panel which was moderated by David, which is here. So at the end, so that's the core thing. On the long term, who's going to evolve these standards? This governance. So the way we create this governance and the technical proficiency and the citizen accountability of this governance is actually the crucial thing. And in fact, we got into a discussion, okay, but then how do we get to the first body? How do we get to elect this first body and make sure that they're good, they're very competent, and they're democratically accountable? And that's a complicated answer we don't have time to do, but considering assemblies, creation of states, we have an experience and we know how to do that. Okay, we talked about these terms before. We have to introduce these terms because we're going orders of magnitude better than the state of the art now, because state of the art now completely is completely inadequate. So we had to coin a new term, and this is a term we try to describe it. What is this level? What is this ultra? During these 2 days, many people say, okay, this ultra high, it's generic, we haven't defined it. Well, we need to define it if we need to make a standard. So we define it as a level which is resistant to persistent attempts by actors with high plausible deniability, like states, nation states. They're not accountable. Even if they get caught, they don't get persecuted. They get a promotion when they get caught breaching their privacy. And very low actual accountability. And they invest tens of millions of euros, the budget of NSA, to compromise the life cycle through bribing RSA to put default bad encryption standards, or to subvert the fabrication level, or even to buy companies. They have venture capital arms that go and buy companies that may be producing innovative technologies that may be beyond the capability to break them. So they have huge amount of money they can spend in any legal and semi-legal ways. Secret services by definition are somewhat beyond the law, and so this is the standards we're against, and so against powerful state actors, and so that's why we go down to the fabrication level, because this should be assuming that each of the employees, single employees, could be a spy or could be threatened or could be bought. Okay. And there are very large numbers of people through the life cycle, single individuals that are in a position to compromise what's happening. Okay, so this is ultra assurance. Then we define another term, trustless computing. Okay, first of all, now we use the term trustless. If you go in a dictionary and look at trustless, it gives two contradictory definitions. On one side, it says the primary definition is distrustful, untrusting. So it means someone who doesn't trust, or is not easy to trust somebody. And it's usually used in a pejorative terms, somebody who doesn't trust. But our conception is that the only way to have trustworthy technology is by trusting no one. And these concepts have been pushed forward also by other experts throughout the years, but never as further as we are. In fact, trust no one is a concept, and zero trust and so on. But then nobody really carried along the way. So we define trustless computing as an ultra assurance computing. So trustless computing is, first of all, is one subset of ultra assurance. But in addition to that, as we see here, in addition to providing ultra high levels of trustworthiness by the users towards the service, so the user can be ultra high assurance of the fact that this system doesn't compromise his rights. It also has ultra high levels of trustworthiness by society against the abuse of users of such service. So if I want to have computing which doesn't require trust in anyone, it should also not have required to have a trust on the end user, because the end user could use these tools to create grave terrorist crimes. So we shouldn't create technology which put a blind trust that that individuals will not use it badly. So that's why we have carefully stated this definition of trustless, in which so both from the end user and from society, you shouldn't be blindly trusting and so on. So let's move quickly to we'll have just time to go through the major points. Okay, so what is the goal as far as levels of assurance? So as far as the assurance, we talked about the resistance to attacks by tens of millions of euros. As far as creating, integrating ability of these services also to comply to lawful access requests which are constitutional, no more nor less, well, the goal is to make so without creating unacceptable risks for privacy of users and citizens. This is a standard terminology that has been used in very famous reports by Bruce Schneier, Stephen Baldwin, Matt Blades. Over the last 30 years, they wrote extremely foundational and fantastic reports studying all the proposals for mandated backdoors from states. And they basically set this kind of terminology, which we think is correct, that the risk should not be unacceptable. Of course, so if you create some kind of provisions for compliance to lawful access requests that can be abused without being detected for hundreds of thousands of people, or even thousands of people, without the detection, then that's unacceptable, an unacceptable risk for society, because a government, a raw government, can use it to spy entire sections of society, all opposition and so on. So that's not acceptable. Of course, we cannot have perfection. So, of course, nobody's asking perfection, but there is a measure of acceptable and unacceptable. The EU Charter of Fundamental Rights is of course one thing to comply to, which is not complied to by any of the technologies. In fact, it's very surprising. We talked about it the other day. Is that now you have regulation for airplane, you have regulation for cars, that you cannot sell cars that flip over. Whereas we go to technology, we have computers which can be hacked by any kiddo out there. They can be in there, read all your stuff, compromise all your rights of privacy, confidentiality, you have the integrity, and people are allowed to sell this stuff. So this is really, if you think about it, it's inconceivable and it's unconstitutional. So we're not going to be proposing that this is made unlawful, because people would say, oh, well, that's state of the art, there's no option. Well, we're proposing an option. So we believe at the very least this should be promoted and put on. So anyway, there is a limitation of scope of this standards that now, of course, the level is not perfection, but the level that would be extremely influential in society is if we achieve a level, as we can see here, in which the protection of the civil rights, of civic participation, expression, freedom of speech, freedom of thought, can be used online. Now, each of us, you use your phone or your computer. Anything you do, you can have no expectation of privacy and integrity. So if I'm talking about a certain party and I don't want my employer or my family to know, I have no clue. I mean, I have no way to protect myself. So there's self-censorship. So there's a situation in which you have certain rights of communication, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, but you cannot exercise it. You have a freedom of participation, assembly for political purposes. You cannot do it. People do it on Facebook. So you cannot do it if your employer or your family now may conflict with it if they discover it. So this right of confidential communications, it's not there. So that is the goal we want to do. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but needs to enable the majority of society to be able to do so. I think we can look at this slide as the last one and then open maybe some comments from the public. So what are the key concepts that we're going to be implementing? Then in the manifesto we also have key paradigms. So we're getting more in detail technically, general principles which then can be further detailed in papers that we're working on. So the key concepts that we're working on is the complete verifiability, and extreme compartmentalization and minimization, and sufficient extreme verification relative to complexity. So what does this mean? It sounds complex. So all the critical components should be verifiable, because if they're black boxes, hardware or software design, I mean, you just have to trust someone. So that needs to be, and no device out there is complies to even this one. Then if we have this, we should basically, in order to have this, we should have extreme compartmentation and minimization. These devices should be as simple as possible, because the more they're simple, the more you can actually verify. They should, and this is most crucial possibly, is they should have an extreme level of verification relative to complexity. So this goes together by having it really minimized and increasing your budget and expertises for verification. You can achieve orders of magnitude or more assurance of what you're doing. This is easily understandable, but it's just not done. So I think these concepts are easy to understand, but they're not practiced out there, and so that's why the need of this new body. In fact, as we said, so this extreme level of verification are made possible by the minimization of features and performance. The second point is extreme oversight centered on offline citizen witness and citizen jury. This is a very innovative concept. Well, actually, it may sound innovative. Right after Snowden make the break, in the next months, the NSA was under a lot of pressure to say, what are you going to do to prevent another breach like that? Because it was a security breach. That critical data, a lot of critical data, even if it was dated, which a single employee, there was no proof of others being indicted for that, was able to, with moderate expertise was able to get all and put it out. So that was a major problem. And the one thing that he proposed, and their statement on that, is that he proposed two solutions. And one of the two solutions was, we're going to have a two-man rule. So we're going to make sure that every access to server rooms which have critical data like this will need two people instead of one, okay? So we're taking that concept and we're bringing it way, way forward, because having two people, if these two people are friends and they work hand-to-hand, is not adding much assurance to me, right? So it really didn't really make much sense. And if instead, I not only require two administrators to be there and make sure that they do that, but I also have citizen witnesses. So in the military area, it could be five randomly selected senior officials. Then the level of assurance, human process assurance that you have is orders of magnitude higher. And these kind of processes are most clearly implemented in the electoral process. During the electoral process, the invention of democracy relies on the fact that even though there is huge amount of money, there is a huge amount of interest in falsifying an election, by having these booths in which there are five randomly selected citizens, or even with conflicting interests, which always have to be present, that reduces dramatically the chance of fraud that doesn't have consequences, right? And so that's based on the principle of citizen witness. Then you have the idea of citizen jury in the US jurisdiction. Since in the US they have class action law, citizen juries, which are present also under other jurisdictions, have been conceived to be much, much more resistant to major attacks. There's been cases in the United States where class actions with billions of dollars in companies were sued for billions of dollars. And so they had attorneys paid tens of millions of dollars to find all kinds of ways, subverted, legal, illegal, to try to compromise the citizen jury by threatening them and so on. There are to get an understanding of this, there's a famous movie, The Jury, with Gene Hackman, which is a fantastic movie and a novel, and you can understand the kind of level of sophistication already of the judicial system, American judicial system, to protect against these kind of scenarios. So there's a lot of literature to get this right. Of course, this citizen jury would not be accountable to the government. It would be accountable to this certification body. So this citizen witness and citizen jury, the citizen witness would be implemented during the fabrication. During fabrication, you have NSA Trusted Foundry Program, is the program by NSA to ensure that their own technology is not compromised during fabrication. And we've had the fortune to have the former technical director of NSA Trusted Foundry Program to advise us on this. We have this partner from Brazil that makes CPUs for voting machine, and they don't have fabrication in Brazil, so I had to do it outside. And so we have a lot of expertise and to know about what is currently the state of the art on this. And so we're basically adding a number of technicians and sensors in the most critical fabrication phases, which go and control that, what is supposed to happen actually happens. Because there is no way to verify if a backdoor was put in place in certain places. But in addition to this process, which is currently what is done by NSA Trusted Foundry Program, we make sure that these technologies are also openly verifiable and use the same standard, which is not the case in NSA Trusted Foundry Program. They use proprietary technology, which it become a black box. It could be compromised in itself. In addition to that, we don't not only have technicians, where we have 5 randomly selected citizens, we act as witnesses in addition to the technician that what was supposed to happen does happen. And this has very negligible costs, because the production, if you're talking about production of 10,000 units, 200,000 units, usually happens over 6 weeks. It means that over 2 or 3 instances, there's going to be 2 or 3 days that this citizen jury go there. It's a very negligible cost in a life cycle. The citizen jury instead is a process. You basically, the certification body would select randomly selected citizens, but in this case they would be trained about their rights, constitutional rights, and so on, give an opportunity to self-train themselves. And whenever there's a need to access a service facility which is hosting any critical data, it could be the source code of the next firmware upgrade, or user data, user identities, or even user backup keys, well, they need to be called. So they need to be physically present and approving of the right to access, and they also have a right to download any change and film any change that is happening. So they have all the process and guarantee the integrity of whatever the administrator does that. This same process is used in addition to technologies which are very, very assured to comply to lawful access requests. So this kind of scenario, so server rooms with servers which are verified all the way down to the bottom, and this access not only protects you about any kind of insider tracks and so on, but enables you also to receive lawful access requests and approve only those that are constitutional. This cannot be done in the United States because they have national security letters by which, if they ask you, you just have to do what they say and don't say anybody, otherwise you're committing a crime, period. In Italy, it's not the case. Even if they come saying there's someone who's blowing up the Vatican and I stop you from going in there, you can be prosecuted only if they demonstrate that you're willingly hiding a crime. Whereas each of these 5 citizen jury has another 4 witnesses that they're stopping a crime from being committed, right? Because that official came with less than sufficient evidence for the lawful access that was doing. David, you may have a question? No? No. Okay. No, not now. I'm sure you have many, but yes. Okay. So, okay, let me go down. I think we're down to the last point. There you go. So, okay. So this is as we said here, including critical hardware fabrication, server room access, including constitutional lawful access requests. The third point is what we mentioned before, extremely technically proficient and citizen accountable ICT assurance standard setting and certification processes. And we had a whole panel discussing this issue today, and it's not an easy thing. Constitutional process is very complex. But in rough terms, you would have a balance of, you should have legislative bodies of democracies. It should be an international body which participate 30%. You would have like a body of like experts, technical experts which are renowned for their also ethical commitment to civil rights. Those are generally known, like Bart Preneel and Bruce Schneier and so on. You would also need agencies which are in the interest of the civil rights and agencies which are in the interest of security. And then this is somewhat innovative. You would have some direct democracy too. So about 30% of the citizen accountability wouldn't be through governments, but it would be through direct democracy. Now there's a form of direct democracy, it's called deliberative polling, by which some citizens are random sampled, then they're given an opportunity, kind of like the citizen jury, to inform themselves on the matters on which they then have to express themselves, and then they actually give their opinion. So, so if you have a democratic process and voters need to express themselves on something that's complex, unless they're given an opportunity to get informed, it's not that way. So it's been practiced in many institutions, in some places also in a permanent way. So we think this can add that kind of layer of citizen accountability without going through the state. And because states have been proven to emphasize security, and whenever there's a terrorist attack, civil rights don't exist. And so that's one idea. But anyway, that's an open issue that could be improved in many different ways. I think that, okay, key paradigms, now we're going like in 2 pages trying to roll down the things that we said before. I think that, this is, I think we communicated the gist of it. And so this is just, as I said, an initial work. Since the last 6 months, we're working on a larger paper of 50, 60 pages. We're also looking for funding from the European Commission on trying to do a much deeper study, a more comprehensive study that can actually compete with in comprehensiveness with other studies done in the US. And so we'll hope to build better document and slowly build a consensus around this, which then can become the basis of a new certification and standardization body. So now I know it's been a long event, and but I really would appreciate if there's any comments, feedbacks, criticism. David.
This is thing. Ah, good. My biggest concerns about this would be about the citizen jury thing on two counts. Firstly, are you really proposing that random people are selected to try and observe hardware fabrication and figure out whether somebody's putting in a back door or not?
Oh yes, but that's part of a wider process. As I said, so we are building upon existing standards, foresee that there are technicians with sensors and workstations. They go inside the clean room with sophisticated process in certain phases, and they just have to make sure through these sensors that what was supposed to happen actually happens, and there's no like tricks. Richard Stallman even suggested to hire magicians, because they're skilled at seeing people that with moving of the hands they can deflect your attention. You could have video cameras, so that's very interesting kind of expertise about multidisciplinary of these ideas. So these citizen witnesses are in addition to it. So given the fact that these technicians, they are big experts, could be bought, could be threatened. Every single person here, even if you have never done any crime, you know, and that's very difficult. Especially because accidentally, people break law. But you could have any relative which has broken a law, and they since like you have some powerful governments that have spy on everyone. So there's an easy way to threaten people, to buy people, and so having these 5 citizens that are additional, they would be an additional filter so these 5 people would be trained to know exactly what is supposed to happen. And they would actually have an additional layer of assurance as far as verifying oversight. It's an oversight that what was supposed to happen actually is compliant.
But if one of the people who's actually trained and knows what they're looking at, if they've been bought or threatened or coerced or whatever, how on earth are the citizen jury people supposed to tell A, that that's happened, and B, that they are saying that's okay when actually a back door's going in? Because that citizen jury people would not be. I mean, I'm lost.
Okay. First of all, I think there's some confusion. Okay, the citizen witness process is applied during the fabrication. Why?
Citizen witness.
Okay. There is a reason why you have citizen witness, because during the fabrication there is no discretionary exercise that you need from these witnesses in this oversight process. Because the only thing you need to ensure that what was supposed to happen actually happens, that there's no funny thing happening, right? And so there is no collusion between the technician, which need to be very expert people, and whoever is going there for happen. So you have to trust one guy or 2 guys. So you want to add an extra level. So these citizen witnesses will be trained for a week, 10 days about that specific act. Maybe there will be a study of what are the scenarios or signs of things that would be, and so they would just act as witnesses. I mean, kind of like a notary. If you're acting as a witness of what's actually happening, and there was no collusion. And whereas in the access to the server room is more sophisticated, because on one side they are witnesses for us as users, because whenever the server room is opened until it's closed, each of the citizens has the right to ask for a full dump of in DVD of all the code that is there. So any intervention on the code, not on the data. So any intervention on the code that is done by the administrator. Administrator enters there because he has to change configuration, change software, upgrade, and we're talking about extremely minimal code base, right? We're not talking about data centers that you see on TV and so on, because we're talking ultra assurance. So creating a dump of that in a DVD would take 1 minute. And so they not only they can do that, but they can also record if the technician is substituting hardware, okay? Since that can constitute a vulnerability and we have no protection from that, they can do that. Of course, there are safeguards against during this process. You need to ensure that these people do not access user data, confidential user data. But that is also the same safeguards you need to have from the administrator that is entering.
The other thing is about the citizen jury. So, I mean, access requests would presumably be in matters involving national security and things like that, or extremely serious crime. So you're going to take random people off the street and show them national security details, people who have no clearance?
Okay, so first of all, it's not picking them out off the street. If you see how the citizen juries in the United States are chosen, usually, especially for high-profile cases, like 80 people are randomly selected, and then 70 people are screened out because of not being knowledgeable enough. But then you have conflict of interest, being represented enough, and there's a lot of challenges. And so there will be a vetting of that. Two, these people would undergo some training about what are the rights, what is true or not, so that they have the necessary knowledge, assisted by a legal. But then at the end, the legal doesn't vote; it just can provide advice and so on, as far as exercising, vetting a request for lawful request. What we're doing here, you're challenging by the fact that. If you have national security investigations, this information is private. That's perfectly, of course, there is a problem because they cannot disclose this information to others. But basically, this process is completely compliant with current law. So basically, there is no requirement or law against providing this service. So just like normally a provider that has information about a user would have their own technician and their own attorney showing up, right? So instead of having their technician and an attorney, we would have, yes, an attorney, but this kind of process which acts as a constitutional buffer. So it's a buffer to guarantee the right of the agencies to protect the national security and the rights of the user. That's exactly the function why citizen juries were invented, right? The citizen jury are not used in every case. They're used in those cases in which the power of the state could be too much, and so it acts as a buffer between state power and individual rights, like the ombudsman, the concept of the ombudsman. So basically, in Italy, this would be legal because just like it's legal for the attorney to see that. So in our case, our attorney is these 5 people. And you can't say anything. We have 5 attorneys. Or I mean, there's no law saying that the information can only be seen by necessary.
Yeah, but these are attorneys. These are people who are then going to carry on being attorneys after the case. I mean,
What's that?
They have a professional investment in that. You know, that they, if they have to hold something confidential or something, that, I mean, these people are then going to go back to their regular lives doing whatever they do. I just cannot see how, state security agencies and all that would ever let this kind of information fall into the hands of people with no clearance.
Okay, first of all, as we said before, people with no clearance, an attorney doesn't have clearance. So if I'm running a service, a crypto service, and I store confidential data, and a secret service comes to me, and I'm in Italy asking the stuff, I'm an attorney, I don't have clearance. So there's no law that says that you need to have an attorney to vet the access to your data. You can choose to delegate your decision to comply or not to whoever you decide. It is possible that maybe we put this kind of service to market and Secret Service go to the legislature and say, hey, we need to pass a new law. Why? Because if we have this kind of scenario and we're going to look for these kind of services, then we have these 5 randomly selected people that even though they will, of course, write some papers in which they will not say to anyone this kind of information because it's important and so on, then the fact that these 5 normal citizens know about it, it constitutes a thing. So this is something that could happen, but it will require a new legislation. And I think that overall, it would be hard for them to make a case that this is against the public security. Actually, something that gives a front door, as some has been calling, which is perfectly legal, perfectly oversight, is transparent, and strikes a balance. So we believe that that's something that could be counteracted in this way. Okay, I think okay. We are now at what time is it? 3:30. Okay, very well. So I think we can just check if. Okay, so thanks everyone for listening to this presentation of the manifesto, and I invite you all to participate in making it as good as possible and getting it widely accepted. gonna contact him also.
He said he sent you the presentation.
There you go, 2:15.
Takes about 3 attempts to
Okay, send him an email.
There you go.
Is he there? He sent an email 10 minutes ago. He said he's ready. I'm also pinging him via my Skype. Roman. Yep. Can I talk to you? Can you listen to us now? Hi Roman, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can see kind of half of you.
Oh, you can see. Okay. Oh, okay. You have a camera. Oh, fantastic. Okay. So I guess that. Just, well, actually, we could put it on top of.
On the chair if you want. On the chair.
Well, actually, if you put it here,
Yeah.
then you can see us. That's great. Actually, this way you'll be higher than us, instead of being down on the floor. Okay. So we don't have one of those robots that Snowden has been using to participate to conferences. No, that actually moves around. But actually, we have one with wheels, but it's not autonomous. It's like manual. Okay, so thanks, Roman, for joining us. Can you hear us okay? Yeah?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay. Can you increase the volume? So, okay, he's gonna do it. Okay, great. So, I guess now we cannot hear you very good. They're checking the volume.
Be there.
What's that?
Or you have to see the PowerPoint.
Yeah, I'm gonna open the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm gonna open your PowerPoint so you can present it to us.
Maybe put the TV.
No?
You don't see anything.
Okay, I think you can see us. Yeah? Okay, that's fine. Okay, I guess you can see part of us, right?
I can see you. I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic.
Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you fine. And also all your paraphernalia robots over there. Are those
Oh yeah,
just
quite a collection, eh?
are those animated or just puppets?
Half and half. I use
Okay.
them to recruit high school students. So
Okay.
some can only handle puppets.
That's quite a background. Okay, so I guess you just tell me next and previous, and once in a while I'll give you the number of the slides so we make sure that you're on the same slides that we're on here. Okay?
And those are the new slides I sent you about 20 minutes ago.
Yes, I opened those.
Okay.
So let me just give a brief introduction. Roman Yampolsky is a renowned researcher on artificial intelligence from University of Kentucky, and he in particular has been focusing on long-term safety, and he has a particular expertise in because he comes from the cybersecurity area, whereas most of the people, surprisingly, that today look at long-term AI safety are not from the cybersecurity. So he brings this kind of expertise. Also, he brings a focus on malevolent, scenarios, or actually, outspokenly looks at some of really the malicious possibilities of various different actors in this area. He wrote a widely published book called Superintelligence, with a lot of different scenarios of the bad things happening. He also, of course, is aware of the potential good of long-term AI, but he, of course, needs he's focusing on the risks. So that's enough for introduction. Roman, it's all yours. You got 15 minutes.
It's an honor to once again address Free in Space. I think it's my third event with you, so I appreciate you guys inviting me. I guess we had some scheduling problems yesterday, but hopefully you'll understand how this fits into the AI safety framework. I will kind of give you a quick intro as to why I think AI safety is an issue, and go over some of the international response we see into this problem. Finally, I'll talk about some of the projects I'm working on and how I'm trying to address the problem. Next slide, please. So, if you're not following closely on developments in artificial intelligence, it helps to kind of look at some work by futurists like Ray Kurzweil, who have developed very nice prediction tools for exponential growth of technology based on just Moore's law and computational trends. The idea is that if we can simulate certain level of performance just from computational point of view, we're likely to get this level of performance. So here you see, if you can tell, this small font, different levels of simulating human brains of all of humanity, brains of lower animals, and we're getting pretty close to the years for which we'll see some interesting results. So between 2023 and 2045 is what is predicted, and it seems to be supported by different plots, different data points. Different people arrive at very similar conclusions. So for that reason, I'm saying we'll probably hit super intelligent systems, or at least human level intelligent systems, within a decade or two, and it makes a lot of sense to analyze possible outcomes and see how that could possibly impact us. Next slide, please. So that's assuming we're on the same slide as what Rufo would call Christmas 365 days a year slide.
Okay, it's called Positive Impacts of Superintelligence.
Yes,
okay.
But I think you refer to it adorably as
yes,
Christmas
yes.
every day, and I think I like that. So the idea is, obviously, there are tremendous positive benefits to having this type of technology. We have full automation of labor, both physical and cognitive. Trillions of dollars in labor alone will be added to the economy. We can do much better science, multidiscipline science. A system with essentially a PhD in every area would be able to bring together some very interesting results at edge cases most people are not qualified to work on. There are really too many benefits to list, and there are, of course, unknown unknowns, benefits we cannot even anticipate just because we're not super intelligent, and so it's hard to predict such things. Majority of my presentation is not about good things, and the reason is we very quickly adapt to positive things, to improvements. It doesn't take a lot of prep work. If you find money on the street, you're ready for it. Now, if you lose money, you need a backup plan. You need to pay your rent somehow, and that's what my next slide and future slides are about.
Yep.
So there are negative impacts. For everything I said, which is positive, there is a negative angle to it. So yeah, tremendous improvements in economy, automation of labor, that means huge technological unemployment. Most people will lose their jobs, if not all people. How do we deal with that? Progress in robotics means also progress in military robotics, killer robots. Political impact, we don't even know how artificially intelligent politicians would fit into modern political landscape, but it seems like we cannot do worse than current US situation. Also, just like with positive slide, there is the unknown situation. With all the brainstorming we do, we are very likely to miss some possible negative impacts from this technology, and that's something we need to anticipate in some way. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So, for a while, this whole area of research, AI safety, concerns about dangers of AI was really science fiction. Nobody cared about it. It was not publishable in any way until a group of famous people started saying that they kind of agree with it. That was a few years ago, and since then we had truly an explosion of interest, lots of people working on it. All of a sudden it's very fashionable to do this research. You get invited to nice events like this one to speak about it. So I'm very happy with support from those famous scientists, entrepreneurs, and others. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So now a bit more about my research. I had a number of recent publications. One was specifically trying to analyze all the different ways we can get to problem states, dangerous AI. And the classification is in a paper. I'm just going to kind of summarize main concerns for you. So I break it down into pre-deployment, meaning while you're training the system, developing the system, and post-deployment. The system is already released, but you have problems you didn't anticipate. So majority of researchers working in AI safety actually concentrate on problems which are not intentional. They look at bugs, poor design, misaligned values of the intelligence system with human values, and that's of course very important and is going to be a problem. But I'm also interested in things like intentional malevolence. So think of hackers using software to commit crimes, steal data, personal information. Any crime you can automate would be automated. And of course, as we have more intelligence, you can have very smart viruses capable of social engineering attacks. So for me, this is somewhat a bigger concern. A, because it's almost impossible to prevent. I mean, you have insider threats, someone within the company can disable safety mechanisms, and also because this type of system would also have all the other problems from other areas. So it would still have poor design, possibly, still be misaligned. It can still learn from bad data. So all the same problems we see with other methods would show up with intentional malevolence. So for that reason, I feel it's a much more important problem and is widely ignored by the AI safety community right now. So I'll talk more about slides on that. There are other pathways which are based on kind of very rare events in our environment. Maybe you have malfunctioning hardware, maybe a cosmic ray hits just the right place in your memory and flips a bit somewhere in your friendly function. So all those are very interesting, and there is a lot of research for each one of those. There are multiple papers either already published or being produced as we speak. So next slide, please.
Yep.
As I said, my concern is malevolent AI, and we published recently another paper which outlines exactly just how one would go about creating malevolent AI, the type of actors, agents involved in this process, and what they possibly can do. And it's interesting to read through it, but essentially the conclusion is almost anyone can be involved in some role. So you have your basic teenagers playing with scripts, you have your hackers, you have government agents, NSA, you have large corporations, you have psychopaths. It's hard to see someone who would not be interested in taking advantage of intelligent systems for their purposes, and in most cases it would not be beneficial for society. So I'm gonna let you actually read the paper on your own to get all the details, but I think some of the interesting points on that list are what I call AI risk deniers, people who say, well, of course, we're not going to have any problems with AIs. They'll be very smart and very nice to us. And this directly contradicts that point. If somebody's doing it on purpose, then no matter what design, what architecture the system is actually using, it would be malevolent by design, by the way it was constructed. So this argument fails. And I think that's very important to address that issue. Next slide, please. In regards to what they can do, obviously all the traditional crimes can be automated. I'm not surprised to see, money laundering or illegal trading or anything of that nature. But also, again, I'll bring your attention back to the unknown unknowns. There are things which you can do with this additional intelligence which we cannot simply predict at this point as even possible. There are things you can do with biological attacks, genetic engineering attacks, nanotech, things which bring in multiple areas of future technology which we cannot really account for at this point. Next slide, please.
Yep.
So the good news is, after, again, the famous people spoke up, there is a significant outreach from international community. I think it all started with the Future of Life Institute requesting this kind of collaborative signing process. We all agree that AI safety is a huge problem, and I think at this point they got like 5,000 signatures from all the top researchers, companies, corporations, really quite a few people at least signed off saying, yeah, that's something we should worry about, it's not science fiction. They were very mild in how they phrased it. They said they want beneficial AI, they want to make sure it's stable, but everything I talked about is kind of part of this bigger concern. And of course, as part of this initiative, there was some fundraising done. Elon Musk gave, I think, $10 million for research and funded a large number of projects with that. So there is now an actually active research community working on this. Next slide, please.
Yep.
Some other very important global initiatives. IEEE just had their meeting trying to iron out a set of ethical guidelines specifically for dealing with AI and in particular with super intelligent technologies. It was important to at least have this type of organization, 100,000 engineers produce something where they're saying, yes, this is a concern, yes, we care about. Was the document very strong in its wording? No, they tried to kind of be very politically correct, if you will, and produce something most people can accept immediately, but still it's a very important step in the right direction. Next, please.
Yep.
I'll briefly go over some other initiatives without getting in much detail. So European Union, UK Parliament is also having interest in this issue. They had some call for ideas and published some interesting proposals, again, from some of those major companies, DeepMind included. Next, please.
Yep.
White House organized an event, actually, I think 4 different events and different aspects of AI future. The one I was particularly interested in and attended was AI safety event. They spoke about the importance of it, and White House solicited, again, proposals and opinions on the issue, which got published like a week ago. Contains a number of very strong contributions as well as a lot of garbage from average Americans. So very, very interesting document to read if you have a chance. Next, please.
Yep.
So finally, I'll tell you about a few actual things we can do and projects I'm working on from computer science, cybersecurity point of view to at least, if not make future systems controllable and safe, but at least make it safer and give us more time to work with them. So one idea is AI confinement. Before we can release those systems, we need to study them, we need to communicate with them in a controlled environment. When you study a computer virus, you have an isolated system, limited access, and you can run things on it and see how it behaves. So that's what we proposed. We developed a communication protocol which deals with different levels of access, and depending on how intelligent the system is, we can reduce access to minimize chance of social engineering attack. So that's one idea, and another one, next slide please.
Yes.
Is this concept of formal verification. It's becoming very popular in software development in general to formally verify your code, kind of like a mathematical proof. Okay, this is definitely up to specifications. The problem is with AI, we don't really provide specifications well, so it's hard to see if it matches what was developed, if it behaves as it's supposed to in novel environments. So it's very much an open problem if we can do actual AI verification, and I just recently put out a paper showing some fundamental limitations to that process, so that could be of interest to bigger AI and software verification community. So I think I had about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to get to my conclusions. Hopefully we can have a few questions after that. So a few things. In my opinion, the biggest concern with AI safety is malevolent, premeditated, dangerous design. And I'm predicting that both frequency and severity of such attacks will greatly increase. I'm working right now on some plots showing this exponential growth in AI attacks and AI fails. Also, again, combining cybersecurity and AI safety angles, a lot of people are working on those AI safety projects. As I said, Elon Musk is funding about, I think, 40 projects right now, but I think none of them actually include cybersecurity part into the project, which means they can be shut off at any point. So even if you have a working system, it's not human-proof. Whoever works there can disable them at any moment. Hackers can disable them. So I think as long as your system is not safe against human attackers, it cannot ever provide true safety for the AI system. Next slide, please. So if you want to read more, there are papers which talk about this research. They are freely available on my website. And next slide, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Roman, for the great presentation. As always, and it's really extremely inspirational and stimulating. So I think in the last part you made a reference about, I think you made a phrase, you said, if you don't make the system proof against a human attack, then we cannot ever hope for the AI to be safe. So this is also a major connection to these 2 days in which we've been talking about ultra high assurance standards for deterministic IT. Deterministic is the contrary of autonomous. And how that, since AI runs on infrastructure, low-level infrastructure, which is deterministic, you have CPUs, you have all of it, which are, if those are not trustworthy and a malevolent actors, one or many of those, can have access through it, autonomously, or maybe even with the help of narrow AI, then you have no chance to make it safe enough, because the basement of what you're doing are not good. In fact, we talked about that in the panel yesterday. It's too bad you were not able to be in person this time. The other, I want to pose one provoking question before passing the microphone. What if you were elected president of the United States, and you were given tens of billions of dollars by the parliament to deploy the kind of safety you want, and you also would be given a fast track to engage other democratic governments in some kind of international agreements to do this. I know you don't have much time to think about it, but I'd like to know what comes to mind that you would do if you got that kind of opportunity.
Well, I like the setup. It's a good start no matter what. At that point, I can retire at least. But it seems like in other technologies, things like biological weapons, chemical weapons, human cloning, genetics research, scientific community came together and agreed, maybe we're not ready to move forward with this research, let's put a moratorium on it. We'll wait a few years until we better understand how human cloning impacts future humans, and then maybe we can proceed and get the benefits out of it. It seems like it's a good idea, not for the whole field of AI, but specifically for those projects which are likely to become general intelligence, to put some brakes on it and limit this type of research for maybe 5 years until the AI safety community can catch up to the broader AGI community research.
Wouldn't that risk to give lead time to the bad guys? So you stop the guys that are on site, and other guys out of sight have more time to go and go to the goal faster.
Absolutely, and that is assuming that building AGI is very difficult. It's hard. It takes huge resources, like Google-size or country-size resources, Manhattan Project essentially. If it's something a kid can do on a laptop in a basement, then no, of course it's not going to work. So that assumes certain level of difficulty to the problem of building AGI.
I have a question.
Yeah, okay, we have David Mayer.
Come back from behind the wall.
Journalist.
Why is nobody building cybersecurity into the stuff yet? I mean, if they've got all of these projects talking about safety, and you say none of them are taking cybersecurity seriously, why is that?
It is is interesting. I honestly think because the problem is just too difficult, no one has any way to address it. Humans are unsafe, so you're not going to get funding or get your project approved if you're honestly going to say, this cannot possibly work, we don't have a solution. So people select a small, narrow sub-problem and go, I will develop shut-off button for an AI system. Give me funding for it, we'll work on it, this button is going to work. Everything else will keep constant. We assume there is no janitor in the building, no hackers, you cannot break into hardware, we're just working on that single small domain. And that's how it's been for a while, and my hope is to bring that problem to a wider audience.
Okay, great. So do we have another question? Okay, so I want to thank Roman for this great presentation and stay with us even for this edition. It's been a long 2 days, so we're closing with this very inspiring presentation, and we're saluting Roman and see you for the next edition, hopefully in person. Okay?
Thank you
very much. Bye-bye.
Speaking to you.
Okay, so everyone, thank you for joining us on this long 2 days of discussions. I hope it's been entertaining and productive, and we look forward to a bigger and more interesting event next year. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sorry for that.
That's fine. That's my battery.
You'll make one day. Okay, what do you think? Pretty tough stuff, huh? You find it interesting? I mean, were you able, like a normal citizen, no? Were you able to how much were you able to understand these 2 days?
Yesterday I was like following the discussion
Okay.
about artificial intelligence.
Ah,
I think
okay.
it was quite interesting.
Yeah, it could, I mean, I think the way Roman presented it, it's very clear, no? It's